Honda has finally come out with its first ever EV. Actually, I should clarify, it's their first EV in North America. Europe and Japan got a bunch of cool stuff that we never got here. And one of my favorite ones was called the Honda E, which I absolutely loved because it was so freaking cute. But this isn't the Honda E, it's called the Honda Prologue, and it actually makes a lot more sense for the Canadian market because it's a larger SUV. But because I know what we didn't get, and because this one took so long to get here, it ends up feeling a little bit underwhelming, even though it's perfectly fine.
For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that.
So first things first, this Honda Prologue shares an electric car platform with the Chevrolet Blazer EV. They're very closely related, and that's actually a really good thing because that is an excellent platform. It gives this Honda Prologue 288 horsepower and 333 pound-feet of torque, which is plenty. But more importantly, it gives this Prologue standard all-wheel drive, and also the range is very good. It's officially rated to have about 439 kilometers of range, but so far I've been able to be getting a lot more than that. Like, I'm much more in the 450, 460 range. And right now it says that if I charged it up to 100%, I can get 495 just based on how efficiently I've been driving. And that is really, really good. Anything that gets us closer to that 500 kilometer threshold is really going to make it easier for more people to get into more EVs because it is just that much more convenient. Another great thing about that platform is that it can charge at speeds of up to 155 kilowatts. That means that you should be able to add 100 kilometers of range in just 10 minutes, which is awesome. And I know those really fast chargers are hard to find, but that is still really, really fast, and I love that. Another thing it does is the onboard charger that comes with the Prologue is great because it's capable of both level 1 and level 2 charging. And that's great because it means you can get level 2 charging without having to install specialized equipment in your garage. So all you need is an access to a 240 volt dryer plug, and that's everything you need to have a full charge overnight. And I really like that because that's just one less barrier to adoption, again, making things a lot more seamless. So the Prologue also offers full one-pedal driving, which I always recommend turning on because it really helps you maximize the range you can get. You can turn it off if you don't like, but there's also two modes. The most aggressive one is just a little bit too grabby, and I found it a little bit too hard to get used to. So I put it in the normal regen, which I think is great. When you come to a stop, it'll stop you automatically and holds the brakes, so you don't actually need to touch the brakes ever, which is great. Driving wise, I really like what the Prologue is offering. So the battery pack is way down low, which helps it feel really stable and planted in corners. The steering is a little bit dead, but that's pretty normal for this segment. What's really good is though the ride quality. That having that battery down low really helps this SUV kind of iron out rough roads. So everything is very comfortable and very smooth. So from the outside, I actually really like how this Prologue looks. There's nothing about it to me that screams EV in your face. To me, it just looks like a regular crossover, except for maybe the grille, which doesn't have airflow because it doesn't need it. But everything else looks really simple and unfussy, and I like that because it means that it's going to age better. It's not going to look really whack in a couple years where, you know, some other EVs right now will look very dated. I think this one will have a longer shelf life. I love the big wheels. The design is great. They're also 21 inches, which is the biggest I think Honda has ever offered on any vehicle. Another thing that's great about the design is the lighting, but also the cool new Honda font that they're using on the back. This is the first Honda that gets that new font, and I think every new Honda going forward is going to have that, so that's pretty cool. So from the inside, I do think it's a little bit drab. I wish there were more colors in here. Besides the contrast stitching, everything is black and gray, and it feels just kind of boring in here. So I would have really liked to see them kind of liven it up especially because it would have been so easy. Like, this piano black plastic is awful. I hate it, and all automakers should stop using it because A, it looks cheap, and B, it collects dust so quickly. It would have been so easy for them to make that panel like orange or something just to give it a bit of life. Besides that, I actually really like what's going on in here, mostly because the design is simple and it makes sense, and it's very practical and very user-friendly. So first of all, I love the fact that they've incorporated a lot of small item storage. You know, besides this huge shelf in the center console, there's also one underneath that can hold a bag or some takeout or whatever. The door pockets are big enough to hold water bottles. This center console under the armrest is also massive. So they really thought out how practical everything is. You know, the trunk is quite big. The seats fold in a 40-60 pattern, which is fine, but I kind of wish it was a 40-20-40 split, which just makes it a little bit more practical. But there's also underfloor storage, and it's pretty huge. And there's a great spot back there to keep the onboard charger, so it's not just rolling around in the trunk. So in general, I think they did a really great job with keeping things practical and user-friendly, and that has to do a lot with the infotainment system too. So this is a Google-based infotainment system, and I like that because that means that the native maps is Google Maps, and everyone knows how to use Google Maps, so it's very easy to get used to. Even though Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are both included and they're both wireless, I would suggest using Google Maps as a native navigation system because it really helps alleviate range anxiety in a lot of ways. So for example, if you put in a destination, it'll tell you what your state of charge will be when you get there. If you don't have enough range, it will help you find charging stations along the way and update your trip ETA based on that. You can also look for chargers based on availability, speed, or price, which is very convenient. And I love all those features because they really help make EV life easier for someone who might be new to it. And I really love that user friendliness. You know, they did a great job on this screen. There's a very useful tray of shortcuts, so all of your most often used functions are there. It's kind of weird that, you know, lighting has to be done through the screen, but that's only one tap away, so it's not too bad. In general, I think they did a great job. And there was something else I wanted to show you too. I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you might be a Honda person, and because this is such a Chevy heavy vehicle, there's a lot of features in here that aren't normal for regular Honda people. And one of them is that there are some really great buttons behind the steering wheel that help you toggle the volume right over here on this side. And there's another one on this side underneath the regen braking paddle that helps you flip through radio stations. And that's just so convenient because I'm a serial radio channel flipper. And whenever I can keep my eyes on the road and still find some good music to listen to, that just makes things much safer and much more convenient. But you would never know they're there because they're unlabeled and you can't see them. But that's why I'm here, is to help you out with that kind of stuff. Going back to practicality for just a second, I think it's okay that both of the front passengers have lots of space. The rear passengers have a lot of leg room, even if there's a tall person in front, but the headroom can be really problematic if you're thinking of carrying adult passengers back there. Often, Will Johnson, our video producer's head is smushed right up against that roof, especially with this panoramic sunroof in here. There's really not enough space. So just keep that in mind if you have passengers often. And another thing that I don't love about it is that it doesn't have a frunk. There's no frunk for storage up there, and a lot of EV owners love having that extra practicality. So those are just a couple things to keep in mind. Another thing I wanted to point out is that I'm super happy, thank God, that there are physical knobs and buttons here in this EV. And I just have to point that out because these days so many EVs centralize every single function within the touchscreen, and I just hate that. I think it's a major safety concern. So when there's physical knobs and buttons like this, I am so grateful because it means that I can keep my eyes on the road to keep me and my passengers safe. But luckily, all Honda Prologues come absolutely stacked with pretty much every safety feature that Honda has to offer. Everything from blind spot monitoring to rear cross traffic alert, lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, all of that stuff is included, which is great to see as standard. While I love that Honda includes all that safety stuff as standard, I gotta say, the safety systems are much too sensitive. It always thinks I'm going to get into a crash, even though there's no imminent danger. And it's so sensitive that the person before me turned all the systems off which totally defeats the purpose. So I really think Honda has to like recalibrate how sensitive their safety systems are so that they actually end up being more useful than not. So Honda Prologues start at around 60,000 bucks. The one I'm driving is the top line touring model, and that ends up being about 72,000 bucks, including destination, but it adds things like a head-up display, which is really nice. That pricing is good because it means that all Prologues are eligible for government rebates, which helps with the cost. But honestly, I feel like it's a little bit expensive. You know, when you look around the cabin and you look at like all this hard plastic, there really shouldn't be this much hard plastic in a car that costs over 70 grand. So I wish they did a little bit more to kind of zhuzh up the interior, but the platform is so good that it really helps justify that cost. To recap, I like the Honda Prologue's unfussy styling, intuitive user interface, and practicality. I'm not a huge fan of some of the hard plastics used or the overly sensitive safety systems. I said in my intro that the Honda Prologue feels rather unremarkable, but I actually think that's a really good thing. Because this is Honda's first EV here, I think they were trying to make sure it felt as approachable as possible to people who have never driven an EV before. And if that's the case, then I think they absolutely nailed it. The Prologue is stylish, it's very practical, and it is very user-friendly. And while it's not doing anything too groundbreaking, it covers all of its bases extremely well.